47 commercial aircraft. That is exactly how many planes were left idling on the tarmac at JFK International Airport, burning thousands of gallons of jet fuel, unable to take off. The financial loss was estimated at $40 million an hour. And it all happened because one senior flight attendant looked at a black woman wearing a vintage university hoodie and decided she didn't belong in seat 1A. She thought she was just kicking off a troublesome passenger. She didn't realize she was declaring war on the woman who owned the very ground the airline was parked on. This isn't just a story about racism. It's a story about the most expensive mistake in aviation history and the brutal, swift karma that followed. You are going to want to watch until the very end to see exactly how the mighty fell. The rain was hammering against the reinforced glass of John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4. It was a miserable Tuesday evening in November, the kind of weather that delayed flights and shortened tempers. But for Vivian St. James, the rain was just white noise. Vivian was exhausted. She had just spent 72 hours in Tokyo negotiating a complex acquisition of a semiconductor logistics firm. She hadn't slept in a bed in 2 days. She was currently wearing a faded maroon hoodie from her alma mater Wharton, a pair of black Lululemon leggings and sneakers that looked worn but cost more than most people's rent. She looked like a tired college student or an off-duty nurse. She definitely didn't look like the CEO and majority shareholder of Ether Global, the parent company that managed the fuel supply chains for 3 of the world's largest airlines. She walked down the jet bridge toward Sterling Airways Flight 909, bound for London Heathrow. All she wanted was a glass of champagne, the lie-flat bed in first class, and silence. At the door of the aircraft stood Brenda Cole. Brenda was the lead flight attendant, a woman who wore her Sterling Airways uniform, like armor. She had been flying for 20 years, and the lines around her mouth were etched with a permanent expression of disapproval. She was checking boarding passes with the efficiency of a prison guard. Vivian approached phone in hand, the QR code for her boarding pass displayed on the screen. "Good evening," Vivian said, her voice raspy from fatigue. Brenda didn't look at Vivian's face. She looked at the hoodie. Then she looked at the sneakers. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't respond to the greeting. She simply held out her hand, snapping her fingers impatiently. Vivian held out the phone. Brenda scanned it. The machine beeped green. 1A. First class. Brenda froze. She looked at the scanner, then back at Vivian. She didn't smile. She didn't say, "Welcome aboard." "Wait here," Brenda said, sharply blocking the aisle with her arm. "Is there a problem?" Vivian asked, shifting her weight. The line behind her was growing. A businessman in a grey suit sighed loudly behind her. "I need to verify this," Brenda said, her voice loud enough for the first 10 people in line to hear. "The system glitches sometimes with upgrades." "It wasn't an upgrade," Vivian said calmly. "I bought the ticket." "Just stand to the side, please," Brenda commanded, pointing to a small corner of the galley where the trash cart was stowed. "Let the actual first-class passengers board." Vivian felt the heat rise in her neck. It was a familiar feeling, the subtle, deniable disrespect. But she was too tired to fight. She stepped aside. She watched as Brenda greeted the man in the grey suit behind her. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Seat 2A. Right this way. Can I get you a pre-departure drink, scotch?" "Please," Mr. Henderson said, stepping past Vivian without glancing at her. Vivian stood by the trash cart for 10 minutes. She watched the entire first-class cabin fill up. She watched business class board. Finally, when the economy passengers began shuffling past, casting curious looks at the black woman standing in the corner. Vivian stepped forward again. "Ma'am," Vivian said, her tone hardening. "I have a valid ticket for seat 1A. I would like to sit down." Brenda looked up from her manifest, feigning surprise that Vivian was still there. "I'm still waiting on confirmation from the gate agent. We've had a lot of fraud lately. Stolen credit cards, hacked apps. You know how it is." "I know exactly how it is," Vivian said, her eyes locking onto Brenda's. "And I know that my ticket is valid. If you don't let me to my seat, I'm going to assume this is a personal issue." Brenda let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Personal, honey, look at you. You're wearing sweatpants on an international flight. I'm just doing my job ensuring the safety and comfort of our premium guests. We have a dress code guideline for first class. That guideline applies to non-revenue staff travelers," Vivian corrected her instantly. "Paying customers can wear whatever they want." Brenda stiffened. She didn't like being corrected. She didn't like that this woman knew the policy manual. "Fine," Brenda spat. "Go sit down, but don't get comfortable. If the gate agent calls and says, 'That card bounced, you're off this plane.'" Vivian didn't reply. She walked past. Brenda entered the first-class cabin and sank into the plush leather of seat 1A. She closed her eyes. She thought it was over. She was wrong. Vivian had just put her noise-cancelling headphones on when she felt a tap on her shoulder. Violent and sharp. She pulled the headphones down. It was Brenda again. But this time, Brenda wasn't alone. She had brought a colleague, a junior flight attendant named Sarah, who looked terrified. "Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass again," Brenda demanded. "I just showed it to you," Vivian said. "I need to physically hold it, and I need to see your ID." Vivian sighed, reached into her bag, and pulled out her passport and her phone. Brenda snatched the passport. She opened it, looked at the photo, looked at Vivian, and then frowned. "Vivian St. James." Brenda read the name aloud, testing it. "This is a very expensive seat, Ms. St. James. $7,000 one way. Is there a point to this commentary?" Vivian asked. "The point?" Brenda lowered her voice to a theatrical whisper, leaning in. "Is that we have a VIP coming on board, a Platinum Legacy member, and it appears there's been a double booking. That sounds like an airline problem, not a me problem," Vivian said. "Well, actually," Brenda smirked. "Mr. Sterling, Airways himself, the CEO's son, is the one who needs this seat. And since you're traveling on a, let's call it a flagged ticket, I'm going to have to ask you to move back to economy. Seat 42B is open. It's a middle seat, but it'll get you to London." The audacity was breathtaking. Vivian knew for a fact there was no double booking. The system didn't allow it for first class. Brenda was trying to bounce her to accommodate someone she wanted to impress. Or perhaps she simply couldn't stomach the sight of a black woman in a hoodie sitting in the most prestigious seat on the plane. "I am not moving," Vivian said clearly. "I paid full fare. I am a Global Services member, and I am staying in seat 1A. "You are causing a disturbance," Brenda said, her voice rising. Heads in the first-class cabin began to turn. Mr. Henderson in 2A lowered his newspaper. "I am sitting quietly," Vivian countered. "You are the one causing a disturbance." "Listen to me." Brenda pointed a manicured finger in Vivian's face. "I am the lead attendant on this aircraft. My word is law. If I say you are disrupting the flight, you are disrupting the flight. Now grab your trash and move to row 42, or I will have you removed." Vivian looked at the finger in her face. She took a deep breath. She had worked too hard to get where she was to be humiliated by a bully in a polyester vest. "Call them," Vivian said. Brenda blinked. "Excuse me, call security," Vivian challenged. "If you want to remove me, you're going to have to drag me off. But I promise you, Brenda and I see your name tag. If you make that call, it will be the last mistake you make in your career." Brenda's face turned a shade of crimson. She turned to the terrified junior attendant. "Sarah, call the gate. Tell them we have a level 3 threat in first class. Tell them she's belligerent, refusing crew instructions and possibly intoxicated." "I am not intoxicated," Vivian snapped, standing up for the first time. She was tall, 5'10", and when she stood, she towered over Brenda. "Sit down," Brenda shrieked, playing to the audience. "She's getting aggressive. Everyone stay calm." Mr. Henderson in 2A spoke up. "She just stood up. She hasn't done anything." "Stay out of this, sir," Brenda yelled. "She threatened me." Vivian sat back down, pulling out her phone. She needed to record this. "Put that phone away." Brenda lunged, trying to grab Vivian's wrist. Vivian pulled her hand back. "Do not touch me. That is assault." "I'm securing the cabin," Brenda yelled. She stormed toward the cockpit interphone. "Captain, we have a situation. I need Port Authority immediately." Vivian sat in the silence that followed. The air in the cabin was thick with tension. She looked out the window at the rainy tarmac. She saw the fuel trucks moving in the distance. They were bright yellow trucks with the logo Ether Global printed on the side. She smiled a sad, cold smile. She texted her assistant Marcus, "Get the legal team on the line, and get the airport operations manager for JFK now." But before Marcus could reply, the heavy thud of boots hit the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority police officers entered the aircraft. They were large men, wet from the rain, looking annoyed to be called for a disturbance. "Where is she?" one of the officers asked. "Right there." Brenda pointed at Vivian like she was pointing at a rabid dog. "Seat 1A. She's refused to move. She's been verbally abusive, and I believe she's using a stolen credit card." The officers marched up to seat 1A. "Ma'am, grab your bags," the first officer said. His name tag read, "Officer Kowalski." "Officer, I have done nothing wrong," Vivian said calmly, keeping her hands visible. "I have a valid ticket. This flight attendant is harassing me." "The flight crew wants you off the plane," Kowalski said. "Once they say you gotta go, you gotta go. We can sort out the ticket stuff inside. Let's go." "I am not leaving this seat voluntarily," Vivian said. "I know my rights. Unless I have committed a crime or violated FAA regulations, you cannot remove me." "Ma'am, we can do this the easy way or the hard way," the second officer said, reaching for his handcuffs. "Refusing a crew member's instruction is a federal offense. Asking me to move to economy because she doesn't like my hoodie is not a lawful instruction," Vivian said. Brenda chimed in from the galley arms, crossed a smug grin on her face. "She lunged at me, officer. She tried to hit me." "That is a lie," Vivian shouted. "That's it," Kowalski said. He grabbed Vivian by the arm. He didn't ask. He yanked. Vivian stumbled out of the seat. Her phone fell to the floor. "My phone!" she cried. "Leave it!" Kowalski barked. He twisted her arm behind her back. The pain was sharp and immediate. "You are making a mistake," Vivian hissed through gritted teeth as they shoved her down the narrow aisle. "You have no idea who I am." Yeah, we know," the second officer laughed. "You're the Queen of England. Move it." They paraded her past the entire plane. 200 people watched as Vivian St. James, a woman who had been featured in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, was frog-marched down the aisle like a common criminal. People were filming. Phones were out. Viviane looked at the faces. Some were sympathetic. Some were laughing. As they reached the aircraft door, Brenda leaned in close to Viviane's ear. "I told you," Brenda whispered. "Trash belongs in the trash." Viviane stopped. She planted her feet, forcing the officers to halt for a split second. She looked Brenda dead in the eye. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "Remember that," Viviane said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. "Remember you said that, because you just grounded this entire airline." "Get her out of here," Brenda yelled. The officers shoved her onto the jet bridge. The cold, damp air hit her face. As they walked her up the ramp, she heard the heavy aircraft door slam shut and lock. They took her to a holding room in Terminal 4. It was a stark, grey room with fluorescent lights that buzzed. They sat her on a metal bench. They hadn't handcuffed her, thankfully, but they had taken her bag. "We need to run your ID," Kowalski said. "Sit tight." "I need my phone call," Viviane said. "Now." "In a minute." "No." Viviane stood up. "I'm not under arrest. You have detained me. I have the right to communicate. Give me my phone, or I will sue this department for unlawful imprisonment and kidnapping." Kowalski hesitated. He looked at his partner. There was something about her voice and authority that didn't match the hoodie. He tossed her the phone. "Make it quick." Viviane didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call her mother. She dialed a number that very few people in the world had. It connected after one ring. "This is operations," a male voice answered. Crisp, professional. "David," Viviane said. "Ms. St. James." The voice on the other end instantly became alert. "We didn't expect to hear from you until you landed in London. Is everything all right?" "No, David. Everything is not all right. I need you to listen to me very carefully." "I'm listening, ma'am." "I want you to execute Protocol 0 for JFK International immediately." There was a silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. Protocol 0 was the nuclear option. It was a clause in the contract Ether Global held with the airport and the airlines. It was designed for emergency safety shutdowns, hazardous leaks, terrorist threats, or extreme geopolitical instability. It involved the immediate cessation of all refueling operations. "Ma'am, Protocol 0. David stammered. "That stops everything. That stops the pumps. That recalls the tankers. That voids the liability insurance for any aircraft currently fueled by us that hasn't taken off." "I know what it does, David," Viviane said, looking at the two-way mirror in the interrogation room. "I want every ether truck recalled from the tarmac. I want the main fuel line valves for Terminal 4 shut manually. And I want you to revoke the credit authorization for Sterling Airways globally. Effective immediately." "Sterling Airways, ma'am, that's our biggest client. If we revoke credit, their fleet is grounded worldwide within the hour." "Do it," Viviane commanded. "If anyone asks why, tell them the CEO of Ether Global has determined that Sterling Airways poses a significant security risk to its passengers, specifically me." "Understood, Ms. St. James. Initiating Protocol 0, shutting down the pumps in 3, 2, 1. Viviane hung up the phone. She sat back on the metal bench and crossed her legs. Outside the window, unnoticed by the police officers, the yellow fuel trucks attached to the Boeing 707s and Airbus A380s began to detach. The hoses were reeled in. The drivers climbed into their cabs and began to drive away from the planes. The lifeblood of JFK Airport was being drained away. The chaos was about to begin. Captain Richard Miller, the pilot in command of Sterling Airways Flight 909, tapped the fuel gauge on his digital display. He was a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience, 15 of them with the Air Force. He knew how things were supposed to work, and they weren't supposed to work like this. He looked out the cockpit window to his left. Through the rain-streaked glass, he saw the yellow Ether Global fuel tanker. It had been connected to the wing, pumping the final 10,000 pounds of Jet A fuel required for the transatlantic crossing to London. But the hose was gone. The driver was already in the cab reversing the truck. "Ground Sterling 909, Miller keyed his mic. "My fuel truck just disconnected. We weren't topped off. I'm showing 80% load. I can't make London with that. Do you have a copy? Sterling 909, this is ground." The controller's voice crackled back, sounding unusually tense. "We're seeing weird movement on the apron. Stand by." Miller watched as the yellow truck didn't just move to the next plane. It drove away. It drove toward the perimeter gate. He looked to his right. The British Airways flight next to him, a massive A380, was also losing its fuel truck. The driver was practically running to unhook the line. "What on earth is going on?" Miller muttered. He turned to his first officer, a young man named Davis. "Call ops. Find out if there's a spill or a hazmat situation." Inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was drastically different. Brenda Cole was beaming. She felt a surge of triumph. She had successfully defended her territory. The riffraff in the hoodie was gone, and in seat 1A sat Julian Sterling. Julian was 24 years old, the son of the airline's CEO Marcus Sterling. He was wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Brenda's car. He was currently scrolling through TikTok without headphones, the sound blaring. "Mr. Sterling," Brenda cooed, leaning over with a bottle of Dom Perignon. "So sorry about the delay in boarding. We had a security issue, but we've handled it. Can I pour you a glass before we push back?" Julian didn't look up from his phone. He just held out his glass. "Make sure it's cold. Last time the champagne was lukewarm. I told my dad to fire the catering manager." "It's perfectly chilled, sir," Brenda said, her smile twitching slightly. She poured the wine. Suddenly the cabin lights flickered. Then the hum of the air conditioning, a constant comforting white noise, died down. The air in the cabin suddenly felt still and heavy. The intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller from the flight deck. We are experiencing a slight delay with our refueling service. We anticipate a quick resolution. Please remain seated." "Unbelievable," Julian groaned, throwing his head back. "I have a dinner reservation at Nobu in London. If I'm late, heads are going to roll." "I'll go check on it, sir," Brenda said. She marched to the front galley and picked up the interphone to the cockpit. "Captain, this is Cole. I have Mr. Sterling in 1A. He is very unhappy. How long is this going to take?" "Cole, we have a problem." Captain Miller's voice was grim. "Every fuel truck at JFK has just left the tarmac. Not just ours, all of them. And dispatch just messaged me. Our fuel credit card just got declined." "Declined?" Brenda laughed. "Captain, we're Sterling Airways. We don't get declined. Tell that to the computer. We are grounded, Cole. Nobody is going anywhere." Meanwhile, in the airport's operations tower, the situation was spiraling into catastrophic chaos. The operations manager, a frantic man named Steve, was staring at a wall of screens. Usually the tarmac was a choreographed ballet of planes, trucks, and baggage carts. Now it was a parking lot. "Steve, I have American, Delta, Lufthansa, and Emirates on the line," a controller shouted. "They're all saying the same thing. Ether Global has pulled all assets. They've initiated a Protocol Zero shutdown." "Protocol Zero?" Steve went pale. "That's the nuclear option. That's for terrorist attacks or massive infrastructure failure. Call Ether's HQ. Get someone on the phone now." "I tried," the controller yelled back. "Their emergency line is just playing a recorded message." "What does it say?" "It says operations at JFK are suspended due to severe security violations against Ether executive personnel by airline staff, pending investigation." Steve froze. Violations against executive personnel. Who did we hurt? Did a truck hit someone? The phone on Steve's desk rang. It was the red phone. The direct line to the Port Authority chief. "Steve," the chief's voice was a growl. "Why are there 47 planes sitting on my runway, doing nothing? I have incoming flights from Europe that I have to divert to Newark and Boston because we have no gates. We are bleeding millions by the minute." "It's the fuel, Chief," Steve stammered. "Ether cut us off. They claim we attacked one of their executives." "Who?" "I don't know. We're checking the incident logs now." At that moment, a junior admin ran into the room holding a tablet. "Boss, I think I found it. I was monitoring the police dispatch logs." "What?" Steve snapped. 30 minutes ago, Port Authority officers were called to Sterling Flight 909 to remove a passenger, a black female, seat 1A. Name. Wait, let me pull up the booking. The admin swiped the screen. His eyes went wide. Name is Viviane St. James. Steve grabbed the desk for support. St. James, as in the St. James family, as in the people who bought Ether Global last year. Yeah, the admin whispered. And the report says the flight attendant Brenda Cole had her removed for suspicion of fraud and dress code violations. Steve looked out the window at the miles of stranded metal. He looked at the 747s, the 777s, the cargo haulers. He thought about the perishable cargo, the connecting passengers, the sheer astronomical cost of a total airport freeze. "Oh my God," Steve whispered. She kicked the owner of the gas station off the plane. In the holding room of Terminal 4, Viviane St. James was scrolling through her emails on her phone. She had missed her flight, which was annoying, but she was using the downtime to clear her inbox. The door to the holding room burst open. It wasn't Officer Kowalski this time. It was a phalanx of people. First was Captain O'Malley, the head of Port Authority Police at JFK. Behind him was Greg Thompson, the station manager for Sterling Airways. And behind him was Steve from Airport Ops. They looked like they had just run a marathon. They were sweating. Greg Thompson looked like he was about to vomit. Viviane didn't stand up. She didn't look intimidated. She simply locked her phone screen and placed it on the metal table. "Miss St. James," Captain O'Malley said, breathless. I am Captain O'Malley. There has been a terrible misunderstanding." "Has there?" Viviane asked, her voice smooth as silk. "Your officers seemed very clear. They told me I was trash. They told me to shut up. They twisted my arm behind my back, which, by the way, is still sore." O'Malley winced. "I apologize profusely. Those officers have been pulled from duty pending an immediate internal affairs investigation. But, ma'am, we have a bigger problem." "I don't have a problem," Viviane said. "I'm just sitting here waiting to be processed for my crime." Greg Thompson stepped forward. He was trembling. Ms. St. James, please. I'm Greg Thompson with Sterling Airways. We need you to turn the fuel back on. Vivian looked at him. Mr. Thompson, do you know why I was removed from your aircraft? I heard there was a dispute about a seat, Greg stammered. There was no dispute, Vivian corrected him. I bought a ticket. Your lead flight attendant, Brenda, decided that a black woman in a hoodie couldn't possibly afford first class. She decided to humiliate me. She decided to lie to the police to have me assaulted and removed. And she did it to give my seat to a nepotism case. Greg wiped sweat from his forehead. I will personally handle Brenda. She will be disciplined. But Ms. St. James, please. We have 47 aircraft grounded. We are losing $40 million an hour. Passengers are stranded. The ripple effect is going to hit Europe in 20 minutes. 40 million an hour, Vivian mused. That's a lot of money. Do you know how much my company is worth, Mr. Thompson? Billions, Greg whispered. Correct. So you can understand that I don't care about your 40 million. I care about respect. And I care about the fact that your airline has a systemic culture of unchecked bias. We will fix it, Greg pleaded. We will issue a public apology. We will comp your flight. We will give you lifetime first-class status. Vivian laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I don't want your status, Greg. I own 3 jets. I flew commercial today because my pilots were on mandatory rest and I needed to get to a meeting I have now missed. She stood up. The room seemed to shrink. Here is what is going to happen, Vivian said. I am going to walk out of here. I am going to get in my car, and I am going to go to a hotel. But the fuel, Steve from Ops cried out. Ms. St. James, you can't leave the airport shut down. I can, Vivian said. And I will, until 2 things happen. Name them, Captain O'Malley said quickly. 1. Vivian held up a finger. I want Marcus Sterling, the CEO of your airline, to call me personally. Not his assistant, him. And I want him to explain to me why he raised a son who thinks he can kick paying customers out of their seats. And 2, Greg asked, dreading the answer. 2. Vivian smiled dangerously. I want that plane brought back to the gate. I want Brenda Cole to come off that plane. And I want her to apologize to me, in front of the police, in front of the passengers. And I want it recorded. Bring the plane back. Greg looked horrified. It's fully loaded. It's on the taxiway. To bring it back now would be a logistical nightmare. Well, Vivian picked up her bag, which had been returned to her. It's not going anywhere anyway. It has no fuel. And since I revoked your credit, you can't even buy a ham sandwich, let alone Jet A. She walked toward the door. The 3 men parted like the Red Sea to let her pass. You have 1 hour, Vivian said over her shoulder. After that, I call my team in London, and we shut down Heathrow too. Greg Thompson pulled out his radio, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped it. Tower, this is Sterling Operations, Greg choked out. Order Flight 909 to return to the gate. Immediately. Copy Operations, the tower replied. Reason for return. Greg looked at Vivian's retreating back. Reason for return. We have to apologize to the owner of the airport. Back on Flight 909, the mood had shifted from annoyance to fear. The plane had been sitting for 45 minutes. The cabin was getting warm. Julian Sterling was furious. Brenda, this is unacceptable. Do you know who my father is? I know Mr. Sterling, I'm trying. Brenda was flustered. Her perfect facade was cracking. Suddenly the plane jolted, The engines, which had been idling, spooled down completely. A tug vehicle attached to the front landing gear. Captain Miller came over the PA system. His voice was no longer professional. He sounded angry. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been ordered by Airport Authority and company operations to return to the gate immediately. We are being towed back." A collective groan went through the plane. Brenda grabbed the interphone. "Captain, why are we going back?" "I don't know, Cole," Miller yelled back, forgetting the open line. "Operations just told me that if we don't go back, the airline goes bankrupt. They said someone needs to apologize." "Apologize to who?" Brenda whispered, a cold knot of dread forming in her stomach. She looked at seat 1A, where Julian was fuming. Then she looked at the empty seat, where the woman in the hoodie had been. No, she thought. It's not possible. She was just a nobody. She was wearing leggings. The plane shuddered as it was pushed back towards the terminal. The rain lashed against the windows, looking like prison bars. Brenda Cole was about to have the worst day of her life. The return to Gate B12 was a funeral procession for a machine. Flight 909, a massive Boeing 777, was dragged backward by a tug that looked like an ant moving a beetle. The engines were silent. The cabin was sweltering. Inside, the confusion had curdled into anger. Passengers were standing up, demanding answers. "Why are we back at the gate?" a woman in business class shouted. "I have a connection in London." Brenda Cole was hiding in the forward galley. She was frantically texting the union representative, but her hands were shaking so badly, she kept hitting the wrong keys. She knew. Deep down in the pit of her stomach, she knew this was about the woman in 1A, but she couldn't process the scale of it. How could one passenger turn a plane around? The aircraft came to a halt with a heavy lurch. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom, tight and furious. "Flight attendants disarm doors for arrival. Gate agent, bring the jet bridge." Brenda didn't want to open that door. She stared at the heavy metal handle like it was the trigger of a gun. "Brenda!" Captain Miller shouted from the cockpit. "Open the damn door!" She took a breath, smoothed her uniform skirt, and forced a smile onto her face. "It's fine," she told herself. "I followed protocol. She was disruptive. I have the report." She grabbed the handle, rotated it up, and pushed. The door swung open. She expected to see the usual gate agent, maybe a mechanic. Instead, she saw an audience. Standing at the end of the jet bridge, right where the carpet met the linoleum of the terminal, was a wall of suits. There was Greg Thompson, the station manager, looking pale and sick. There was Captain O'Malley, the police chief. There were 3 other men she didn't recognize, looking terrified. And in front of them, all standing with her arms crossed, wearing that same faded maroon Wharton hoodie, was Viviane St. James. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked like a judge. "Ms. Cole," Greg Thompson barked, his voice echoing in the tunnel. "Step out of the aircraft, now." Brenda hesitated. "Sir, I have passengers to attend to." "Leave them," Greg screamed. "Get out here." Brenda stepped onto the jet bridge. Behind her, Julian Sterling pushed his way out, looking annoyed. "What is the meaning of this?" Julian demanded, adjusting his expensive tie. "Why are we back? Do you know who I am?" "Shut up, Julian!" a voice boomed from Greg Thompson's hand. He was holding a phone on speaker mode. Julian froze. "Dad." It was Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Airways. His voice was coming through loud and clear, and it sounded apoplectic. "You are going to stand there and shut your mouth, son," Marcus Sterling roared through the speaker. "You and that flight attendant have just cost this company $45 million in the last hour. If Ms. St. James is not satisfied in the next 5 minutes, you will be scrubbing toilets in the maintenance hangar for the rest of your life. Do you understand me?" Julian went white. He stepped back, leaning against the wall of the jet bridge, suddenly very small. Brenda stood alone in the center of the circle. She looked at Vivian. "I don't understand," Brenda whispered. "Let me help you," Vivian said, stepping forward. She didn't shout. Her voice was calm, conversational, which made it terrifying. "You judged me. You looked at my skin, and you looked at my clothes, and you decided I was beneath you. You decided I was a fraud. You refused to move," Brenda stammered, falling back on her script. "You were non-compliant." "I was a paying customer," Vivian corrected. "I own Ether Global. The fuel in the wings of this plane, I own it. The fuel in the trucks outside, I own it. The contracts that keep this airline flying, I signed them." Brenda's knees buckled. She grabbed the railing for support. Ether Global. Everyone in aviation knew who Ether was. They were the kings of the tarmac. I didn't know," Brenda choked out. "That is exactly the point, Brenda," Vivian said. "You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with basic human dignity. You shouldn't need to know my net worth to not call the police on me for sitting in my own seat." Vivian pointed to the open door of the plane. The passengers in first class were crowding the doorway, listening. Mr. Henderson was there. The junior flight attendant, Sarah, was weeping softly in the background. "You wanted to humiliate me," Vivian said. "You wanted an audience. Well, now you have one. I told your boss I wouldn't turn the fuel back on until you apologized. So I'm waiting." The silence stretched. The sound of rain on the metal roof of the jet bridge was the only noise. Brenda looked at Greg Thompson. He looked away. She looked at Julian. He was staring at his shoes. She looked at the police officers. They were stone-faced. She had no allies. The power she thought she wielded, the power of the uniform, the power of the lead attendant badge, was an illusion. Slowly, painfully, Brenda Cole lowered her head. "I'm sorry," she mumbled. "I can't hear you," Vivian said. "And neither can they." She gestured to the passengers. Brenda closed her eyes. Tears squeezed out. "I am sorry," she said louder, her voice cracking. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have moved you. I shouldn't have called the police. I profiled you. And I am sorry." Vivian held her gaze for a long moment. She didn't smile. She didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't okay. "Apology noted," Vivian said coldly. She turned to Greg Thompson. "Get her out of my sight." "You're fired, Cole," Greg said instantly. "Surrender your badge, now." "But my pension," Brenda sobbed. "I have 20 years. You breached the code of conduct, the non-discrimination policy, and you caused a catastrophic financial loss," Greg said. "You'll be lucky if we don't sue you for damages. Badge, now." With shaking hands, Brenda unpinned the silver wings from her chest, the wings she had worn for 2 decades. She handed them to Greg. Then she walked past the police, past the crew, and down the long, lonely terminal hallway. She was just a civilian now, and a banned one at that. Vivian turned to the phone in Greg's hand. "Marcus," she said. "Vivian?" The CEO's voice came back, sounding humbled. "I am deeply, deeply ashamed. This airline will be issuing a formal statement tonight. We are launching a complete overhaul of our sensitivity training. And as for my son..." Vivian looked at Julian. He looked like a child waiting for a spanking. "I don't want him fired," Vivian said, surprising everyone. Julian looked up, hopeful. "I want him to fly economy," Vivian said. "Middle seat, row 42, next to the toilets, all the way to London. If he moves or if he complains once you void his inheritance." "Done," Marcus said. "Get in the back, Julian." Julian hung his head and slunk back onto the plane past the smirking passengers, heading for the back of the bus. Vivian took a deep breath. She looked at Steve, the ops manager. "Turn the pumps back on, Steve." "Yes, ma'am," Steve practically shouted into his radio. "All units, Protocol 0 is lifted. Resume fueling, repeat, resume fueling." Outside, the engines of the yellow trucks roared to life. The airport began to breathe again. Vivian St. James did not look back as she walked away from gate B12. The sound of the jet bridge door closing behind her was the only period she needed for that sentence. She didn't return to the chaotic terminal, nor did she wait for a commercial rebooking. A black Lincoln Navigator escorted by airport security was already waiting at the tarmac level. She slid into the back seat, the leather cool against her skin. The silence was absolute, a sharp, welcome contrast to the cacophony of the last 2 hours. She pulled out her phone and dialed David, her chief of operations. "Status," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The pumps are active, Ms. St. James." David replied, his voice tinny through the car's speakers. "Flow rate is back to 100% at JFK, but the backlog is severe. It's going to take them 18 hours to clear the flight queue. You've effectively paralyzed the entire Eastern Seaboard's aviation network for the night." "Good," Vivian said, staring out the tinted window as the car sped toward the private aviation terminal. "Prepare the G650. I want to be wheels up for London in 30 minutes. And David, yes ma'am, draft a press release. Short, vague. Mention operational discrepancies and zero tolerance for discrimination. Don't name Sterling Airways yet. Let them sweat." "Understood. The jet is fueled and waiting." As Vivian boarded her Gulfstream G650, a $65 million sanctuary of cream leather and rare wood, the world outside was catching fire. The digital wildfire started before Flight 909 even finished pushing back to the gate. A 20-year-old college student in seat 3A had filmed the entire interaction between Brenda Cole and Vivian. He uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "Flight attendant goes Karen on black lady in first class." Turns out, she owns the airport. Atol Sterling Airways, Karma, are fired. By the time Vivian's private jet reached cruising altitude, the video had 4 million views. By the time she was served her dinner, wild salmon with asparagus, it had hit 20 million. The internet is a cruel and efficient judge. Within 2 hours, Brenda Cole was trending worldwide. Twitter sleuths had found her LinkedIn, her Facebook, and even her high school yearbook photo. The comments were a deluge of righteous fury. But the real damage wasn't social. It was financial. At the opening of the Asian markets, Sterling Airways stock plummeted. The uncertainty of the fuel crisis, combined with the PR nightmare of a viral racism scandal, caused a panic sell-off. In 4 hours, the airline lost $1.2 billion in market cap. While the world burned online, Julian Sterling was experiencing a very physical, very personal hell. He was currently wedged into seat 42E on the rescheduled Flight 909. It was a middle seat in the absolute center of the aircraft. To his left was a large man who had clearly fallen asleep instantly, his elbow digging sharply into Julian's ribs. To his right was a mother holding a teething infant who had been screaming at a glass-shattering decibel level since takeoff. Julian tried to summon a flight attendant. He pressed the call button. A young male attendant appeared. He looked exhausted and stress-eaten. "Yes?" he asked curtly. "I need some water," Julian said, his throat dry. "And do you have any noise-cancelling headphones? The ones from first class?" The attendant looked at Julian. He looked at the call button. Then he looked at the tablet in his hand. "You are in economy basic, sir," the attendant said, his voice dripping with malicious compliance. "Amenities are for purchase only. Headphones are $10. Water is $4. Card only." "I don't have my wallet," Julian snapped. "My father is the CEO. Just get it for me." The attendant smiled, a tight, forced expression. "We have received specific instructions regarding your booking, Mr. Sterling. No comps, no upgrades, no exceptions. Would you like to open a tab? Oh, wait. I see here your credit privileges have been suspended." The attendant clicked off the call light and walked away. Julian slumped back, defeated. The baby screamed again, a high-pitched shriek that pierced his brain. He closed his eyes, visualizing the lie-flat bed in 1A that he had been so smugly occupying just hours ago. The smell of the man next to him, a mixture of stale coffee and damp wool, made him gag. It was going to be a very long 7 hours. Back in New York, the rain had stopped, but the storm for Brenda Cole was just beginning. She was sitting in the HR office of Terminal 4. Across from her sat the Regional Director of Human Resources and a lawyer from Sterling's legal department. The room was cold fluorescent and smelled of sanitizer. "We have reviewed the passenger footage, the police report, and the cockpit voice logs," the HR director said. She didn't look up from her file. "You violated Article 4, Section 2 of the Code of Conduct, Discrimination and Harassment. You violated Article 9. Gross misconduct leading to reputational damage. And you violated the cardinal rule of aviation safety. You lied to federal officers to incite a removal." "I was just trying to protect the cabin," Brenda whispered, her voice a husk of its former authority. She was still wearing her uniform, but the wings were gone, leaving 2 small holes in the fabric over her heart. "You were protecting your ego," the lawyer cut in, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "This is your termination notice, effective immediately. You are stripped of all seniority. Your pension contributions are frozen, pending a legal review of damages. Sterling Airways reserves the right to sue you for the operational costs of the ground delay." Brenda's eyes widened. "Sue me? That was millions of dollars. I don't have that kind of money." "Then you should have thought about that before you profiled a billionaire," the lawyer said coldly. "Sign here." Brenda signed. Her hand shook so badly, the signature looked like a seismograph of an earthquake. "One more thing," the HR director added as Brenda stood up to leave. "Your details have been added to the industry watch list. I wouldn't bother applying to Delta United or American. You won't even get an interview for a gate agent position. You are grounded, Brenda, permanently." Brenda walked out of the office. She walked through the terminal she had ruled like a queen for 20 years. Now she was a ghost. She saw her colleagues, people she had flown with for decades, turn their backs as she passed. No one made eye contact. She was radioactive. She reached her car in the employee lot, sat in the driver's seat, and turned on her phone. She saw the news. She saw the video. She saw the millions of comments calling her a monster. She put her head on the steering wheel and screamed until her throat bled. 1 week later. London. The headquarters of Sterling Airways was a glass monolith overlooking the Thames. The mood on the top floor was funereal. Marcus Sterling, the CEO, sat at the head of the mahogany boardroom table. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. The stock had stabilized, but only just. The board was calling for his resignation. He had one chance to save the company, and that chance was walking through the double doors right now. Viviane St. James entered the room. She did not look like the woman in the hoodie. She was wearing a tailored Givenchy suit in charcoal grey, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She was flanked by 2 lawyers and David. She radiated power. Everyone in the room stood up. It was an instinctual reaction to the Alpha entering the space. "Ms. St. James," Marcus said, extending a hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Viviane didn't take the hand. She simply gestured to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. "Sit down, Marcus. Let's not pretend we're friends." They sat. The air in the room was so tense it felt solid. "We have prepared a formal apology." Marcus began sliding a leather-bound folio across the table. "And a compensation package. We are offering you 5 years of unlimited first-class travel. A donation of $1 million to a charity of your choice, and—" "Stop," Vivian said. She didn't raise her voice. She just held up a single manicured hand. Marcus stopped mid-sentence. "I don't want your free flights, Marcus. I have my own planes. And $1 million. She laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "I lost more than that while I was standing in your jet bridge, listening to your flight attendant call me trash." She leaned forward, placing her elbows on the table. "Here is the reality," Viviane said. "Ether Global supplies 40% of your fuel in North America and 60% in Europe. Our contract expires at the end of this month. I am currently entertaining offers from British Airways and Virgin Atlantic to take over your allocation." The color drained from Marcus's face. If Ether pulled out, Sterling Airways wouldn't just have delays. They would cease to function. They would be grounded globally. "Viviane, please," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "That would bankrupt us. We employ 50,000 people." "Then you better listen closely to my terms," Viviane said. She signaled to David, who slid a new contract across the table. It was thick. Term 1, Viviane listed, counting on her fingers. "Sterling Airways will implement a mandatory third-party diversity and bias training program for every single employee, from baggage handlers to the C-suite. My team will select the auditors. If you fail an audit, the fuel price doubles." "Agreed," Marcus said quickly. "Term 2, Viviane continued. "You will create a permanent board seat dedicated to customer experience and civil rights oversight. I will appoint the person who sits in that seat. They will have veto power over your hiring policies." Marcus hesitated. That was giving away control of his company. But he looked at Viviane's eyes and saw no mercy. "Agreed." "And term 3, Viviane smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The pricing. We expected a hike," Marcus admitted. "Market rates have fluctuated. This isn't a market rate adjustment," Viviane said softly. "I am adding a 3% surcharge to every gallon of Jet A pumped into a Sterling Airways aircraft. Forever." 3%, the CFO gasped from the side of the table. "That wipes out our profit margin for the next 2 quarters. That's tens of millions of dollars." "I call it the asshole tax," Viviane said, her voice freezing the room. "Consider it the cost of doing business with me after you let your staff treat me like a criminal. You can pay it, or you can find another fuel supplier. Oh wait, you can't. Because I bought the other 2 suppliers yesterday." The room went deadly silent. It was a checkmate, so complete, so devastating that it was almost beautiful. Marcus looked at the contract. He looked at his CFO, who shook his head in despair. Then he looked at Viviane. He picked up his pen. "Where do I sign?" Viviane watched him scrawl his name. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel glee. She felt the heavy, solid weight of justice. She stood up, smoothing her jacket. "Pleasure doing business with you, Marcus," she said. She turned to leave. As she reached the door, she stopped and looked back at the defeated board of directors. "Oh, and tell Julian I hope he enjoyed the middle seat," she added. "I hear row 42 has a lovely view of the wing." She walked out of the building and into the London rain. But this time the rain didn't bother her. She opened her umbrella, stepped into her waiting car, and drove away, leaving the airline that had tried to ground her, struggling to stay afloat in her wake. She had grounded their planes with a phone call. Now she owned their future with a signature. It was, all things considered, a very good week. Wow. What a story. I hope you guys enjoyed this roller coaster of karma and justice. If you did, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Do you think the punishment for Brenda and Julian was fair, or should they have suffered even more? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post brand new dramas every single week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.